Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This is the third in a series on broadband equity, access, and deployment, BEAD, planning for Wisconsin counties and tribes, and REDOs. Remember, REDOs meaning Regional Economic Development Organizations. My name is Chris Stark, Digital Equity Specialist with University of Wisconsin Extension, and I will serve as your facilitator for today's session. I'd like to recognize my Extension colleagues who will be working behind the scenes to ensure our session runs smoothly. Brandon Hofstedt, Community Economic Development Program Manager, and Jessica Beckendorf, Digital Equity Facilitation Specialist. They will be monitoring the waiting room and facilitate questions throughout the chat. The webinar is being co-sponsored by the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, Community Economic Development Program, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, Office of Rural Prosperity, and the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Broadband Office. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Today's meeting is being recorded, and the final video, along with PowerPoints from the session, will be posted on the Extension Community Economic Development website. The webinar has a closed captioning option if needed. See the bottom of your screen, please. As a friendly reminder, please be sure to mute your microphones when not speaking. If you would have questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop your questions or comments into the chat. You may send a private chat to either myself or perhaps best Brandon Hofstedt or Jessica Beckendorf. This webinar is the third of 3 virtual webinars Extension will be co-sponsoring with the PSC and WEDC focused on broadband equity, access, and deployment planning for Wisconsin counties, tribes, and REDOs. During today's session, we will highlight the BEAD planning grant timeline, deliverables, and process for finalizing contacts. WEDC will share exciting news about the GeoPartner speed test mapping tool being made available to all counties and tribes to assist in local planning. We will end our session describing a survey all counties and tribes will be asked to participate in as part of the state's BEAD and digital equity planning process. We are very excited to report that all 72 counties, 5 tribes, and 6 REDOs have executed letters of intent to participate in the BEAD County, Tribal, and Regional Planning Grant Program. Your participation and commitment to the BEAD planning process is critical as Wisconsin works to prepare both its BEAD and digital equity plans to ensure internet for all. Your local and regional participation is the only way we can be certain to meet the needs of people where they live, work, and play. We recognize that each of you is at a different stage in the planning process and will require different assistance. The PSC will be requesting planning status reports by this summer 2023, to incorporate into the state's digital equity and BEAD plans, but county and tribal technical assistance will continue for 2 years. We want to assure each of you there is no wrong door to seeking technical assistance, and together our organizations will work together to help you gather the resources you need. Now, our first presenter for today is from the Public Service Commission Broadband Office and is Mr. Jaron McCallum. And Jaron is the Strategic Initiatives Coordinator within the Wisconsin Broadband Office in the Division of Digital Access, Consumer and Environmental Affairs at the Public Service Commission. In his role, he pursues strategic initiatives, projects, and partnerships to advance broadband expansion, support technical assistance to communities, increase outreach and stakeholder engagement, and promote the work and mission of the Broadband Office. Jaron has been with the WBO in various roles for over 7 years and has always been very helpful to me. Jaron, you have the floor, so to speak.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that introduction. Are folks seeing a PowerPoint or a blank blue Windows slide right on our screen?
No, we're seeing a PowerPoint right
Okay,
now.
perfect. Let me flip that over.
PowerPoint.
Perfect. I just wanted to be sure. Good to make sure you're sharing the right screen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. My name is Jaron McCallum, and as Chris mentioned, I am with the Wisconsin Broadband Office. And I'm here to talk a lot about the BEAD, or Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Local Planning Grant Program. So I kind of want to do a little bit of level setting. So at a high level, this BEAD local planning grant program provides funds to support local broadband planning efforts and build local capacity that will be needed throughout the duration of the BEAD planning and implementation period. And it really enables entities that have opted in, we've kind of already passed that opt-in period, to receive formula funding to participate in these broadband planning activities, again, to support locally informed analysis of broadband needs. And this is really in an effort, the commission, the PSC, and the broadband office are interested in gaining insight into each local community's vision for broadband development. And as Chris had mentioned, our office and the PSC has a state 5-year action plan that will be due this August, end of August, August 28th to be specific, I believe, which will guide broadband deployment and implementation of the BEAD program. Now, I will say this BEAD local planning grant program is really focused on the planning efforts prior to the BEAD infrastructure grants. Folks might know BEAD as more of an infrastructure focused grant program, and I think that's largely true. But what we're focused on with this local planning grant is kind of the front end of that, making sure we have all of our ducks in a row and local coordination and local input. So this BEAD infrastructure rollout meets the needs of all Wisconsinites. I will also say that the commission works off of dockets oftentimes, and the docket associated with this BEAD local planning grant program is 5-BP-2023. Talk a little bit more about that later, but if folks are curious, you can check that out on the commission's ERF or electronic records filing system. There are other broadband planning things in that docket as well, but BEAD local planning is within that docket. So Chris stole my thunder a little bit here, but that's okay. But by the numbers, we are very pleased to share that we had 77 entities opt in. All 72 counties submitted letters of intent, and we had letters of intent submitted from 5 tribes. Now, 48 of those entities are collaborating through one of the 6 participating REDOs or regional economic development organizations. And we have 29 entities participating independently, whether that be a county or a federally recognized tribe. Like I said, we're really excited about this robust participation. Really shows the need and the importance of broadband planning and the need and importance of affordable, high-speed, reliable broadband for all Wisconsinites. Moving forward just a bit further, so I hope folks have already seen this. This is just kind of a screenshot of the allocation letter that was posted last month, latter part of March. And this shows the entities that have opted in, and you can find those allocations that were distributed of the $1.5 million in total. Now it's broken down by the participating regional efforts and then also the individual counties or tribes that opted in as well. So in this screenshot, like I said, this is just a portion of it. So you're actually just looking at Centergy and MadRep. But if you look at the full document, you can see later, further down the document, the breakdown. But in red, you can see circled the allocation determination for each entity. So I'd encourage folks to check that out. Entities that I'll actually just share it here. Entities that opted in individually, it was about $18,000 that ended up being distributed, but the specific number is in that allocation table and letter that can be found on our webpage or on the ERF's system under the docket 5BP-2023. Now, I'm going to stress this a couple times, but it's important to note that the REDOs representing counties, and whether it's a county or a tribe, they will be the ones submitting the application and receiving the funds on behalf of those counties and tribes that they are representing and opted to collaborate with regionally. So that's not the same for a county or tribe that opted in independently, but if there was a REDO that opted in regionally and counties and tribes below, the REDO would be the one actually submitting the forms, the grant application and handling the funds and being the grant administrator. So our office issued grant instructions today. If you're really on the bell, you actually probably noticed that they were posted late on Friday last week. But the issued application instructions, that was April 3rd. That's today. Now there will be a deadline of April 28th to submit to submit questions and requests for clarification pertaining to these grant instructions. And then on the same day, April 28th, will be the deadline for requesting grant system assistance. A lot more on the grant system later. So if you have questions, stay tuned. May 1st, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. That is when the applications will be due from applicants. And that's in essence the deadline for submitting on the PSC grant system. Those applications will be public and auto uploaded to IRF once they are submitted in the grant system. And just at a very high level, these grant instructions were issued to help applicants navigate the grant system and submit that application via the grant system. Moving forward just a little bit. So the applicants for this grant system are, I want to stress this again, counties that opted in independently, redos that have opted to facilitate collaborative participation among one or more of their represented counties or tribes, or finally, federally recognized as tribes that opted in independently. So any counties or tribes that have opted to participate collaboratively via a redo, they do not need to individually apply to fill out this application on the grant system. The redo would do that on their behalf. So hopefully that's clear, but if there are any questions, please let us know in the question and answer period. So let's move a little bit further into the grant system. So the PSC grant system is actually the system that will intake all the information. It will put it auto upload it to IRF, and it'll really be a great mechanism to have in place come reimbursement time for those entities that are participating to actually submit for reimbursement and get funds, request funds for work performed. I've linked the PSC grant system there. I've also linked the PSC grant system user guide. Now, the user guide really is a great resource to kind of the 101 and the how-tos of the grant system. So I would encourage folks to check that out. So again, utilizing the grant instructions, we'll need applicants to actually submit a simple grant application via the grant system. And actually how you log into the grant system is similar to how you would to log into IRF. It's actually, the accounts are tied. You may need to create an account depending if you already have an IRF account. But if you already have an IRF account, you may need to actually validate that account to access the grant system. But if you've already interacted with the grant system, I don't believe we'll have to do those steps in terms of creating or validating your account. But I'd imagine a lot of folks have already created an IRF account to submit the letter of intent onto IRF. But I would imagine a lot of folks haven't actually validated their account to actually interact with and submit on the grant system. So that will be a step that I would imagine folks will likely need to take. So I'm gonna actually, before I dive into some of the specifics of the grant system, I wanna hit a couple high notes. Be sure to save your work. There is an option to save your work along the way without actually submitting it. We'd ask that you don't use hyperlinks kind of in some of the narrative or text box type of responses that you can provide. It's just cleaner and easier if we don't have to go out and refer to hyperlinks kind of outside of the grant system. And then I'll talk about the context tab in a bit. So let's talk about the details tab. And I do have screenshots later on. So there will be a series of tabs across the grant system. And the first one will be details. That'll be things like a project name, project description, the grant amount that you're requesting, which will be the same amount from that allocation table. Any recipient and partner contributions, in this case, should be 0. And then the grant application details. We will ask that you complete some contacts. We will need, at a minimum, 1 primary contact. And we would ask that primary contact be the same primary contact that was submitted on that letter of intent. Just for continuity's sake, that would be great. If you need to, you can actually, say there was an error in that, you can upload a new primary contact or input a new primary contact, but ideally those would be the same between that letter of intent form and then what's in the grant system. And there is the option to add secondary contacts, say if there's another person involved with the planning process, or maybe a fiscal individual, someone focused on the budget, that sort of things. There is an option to add secondary contacts, but we do need 1 primary contact at a minimum. And then there will be another budget tab, even working your way across left to right in the grant system. And that's where applicants should enter their allocation amount in the other row. Now, this is something that's important to stress here. So in the kind of full detailed budget, there is a number of different cost categories that applicants can utilize. But for purposes of this May 1st deadline, we are asking to all applicants to submit within that budget tab all of their allocated amount in the other category. And I think I've got a screenshot followed up here that might illustrate that better. Perfect. So this will be actually what you see in the grant system. So I talked about the details tab, the contacts tab, and now we're working on the budget tab. And within that allocation table that I mentioned later that let every entity know how much they're receiving, you would take that number and put it in the other category in the grant funded. And here it's listed as $18,337.40. The contribution funded would be 0. And then if notes, you could just put placeholder if you would like. So when applicants are submitting this in the grant system, we're asking that you take your full allocation and put it in the other category for this March 1st deadline. We will ask for a more detailed budget later on, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But when you're submitting on the grant system, please put everything into that other category. As you might have mentioned, there was, or you might have also noticed, there was a narrative tab within that grant system, and that is where we will ask a series of 4 questions, really asking, most of them are yes or no. The first being, is the applicant a Wisconsin county, redo, or federally recognized tribe listed on the allocation letter? Simple yes or no. Will the applicant use the grant funds for BEAD local planning eligible activities and costs that are allowable under these federal funds? Simple yes or no. The third one is a little bit more detailed. We will be asking that applicants list up to 3 eligible planning activities that the applicant will complete during the performance period. And the performance period is February 1st of this year through May 1st of 2025. And then provide a short description of those intended outcomes or deliverables for each activity. So we would ask that up to 3 activities, list those out. And there's kind of a text box that you can type this into in the grant system. And we'll talk more about eligible planning activities later on, but list up to 3 of those and that you would like to complete or will intend to complete within that performance period. So the performance period is 2 years essentially, and that's important to note, especially when you consider some of those initial deliverables that will be due this summer. But we fully expect that planning and activities will take place beyond that, within kind of, or excuse me, it could take place within that full performance period beyond the June 19th deadline that we've got for initial deliverables this summer. So that 4th bullet point is related to those initial deliverables that I just spoke about. So by June 19th of 2023, does the applicant agree to submit the required interim project status report with the 5 required deliverables? Simple yes or no. So a little bit more about the budget. I already talked through a lot of this, but we do have an overview and budget document that talks a lot about what I'm going to cover here today. So you can refer to that if you would like. But as I mentioned, for purposes of the May 1st deadline, asking applicants to submit a placeholder budget, put that full allocation in the other category, and then we'll ask for a detailed grant project budget with cost categories by June 19th, along with those other initial deliverables. Just so folks are aware, I did list out the remaining 5 other categories that general categories that can be allocated to later on when you're submitting that detailed cost budget. But again, for purposes of the May 1st deadline, just put everything in other. But it's good to be thinking about those other categories early and often, just because you will eventually have to kind of break that down between those categories. So let's talk about the initial deliverables a little bit more that I spoke to within those 4 bullet points in the grant system in the narrative tab. By June 19th of 2023, it is expected that each grant signatory or entity will have 1, convened an initial planning group or provided documentation of meetings of an existing group. I know that a lot of counties or regional efforts are already kind of having regular meetings and that sort of thing. So that would be good documentation to show if they have already been meeting. 2, begin outreach to stakeholders in the community and or region related to broadband planning. 3, identify the preliminary regional broadband vision and draft goals. 4, identified key barriers and opportunities related to internet for all in their community and or region. And then 5, submit a detailed grant project budget by cost category. Actually, why don't I jump back? So these initial deliverables really allow our office, the Wisconsin Broadband Office, with them being due in June, it allows us to incorporate and kind of hear that feedback, at least initially, so we can include and kind of consider that for our 5-year action plan that is due end of August. So that's kind of why we're asking for some of these initial deliverables. And we also are of the understanding that different counties are in different spots, different regions are in different spots, and different counties and regions might have different needs. So our hope is that these baseline 5 questions set a little bit of a level playing field between the entities, but the freedom and the flexibility to actually beyond that allocate and spend these planning dollars is largely up to those entities on how they want to go about spending and allocating those dollars. So there's been a lot of questions about, what are the allowable categories? What can these funds be used on? What are some examples? So now I'm really going to kind of dive through examples and specific categories to help maybe get the juices flowing or provide ideas that you might consider to do in your area. So the allowable kind of general categories are research and data collection. I won't read the entire slide here because I'm going to go through some of the specifics, but research and data collection, publications, outreach, communications, support related to broadband and digital equity planning, providing technical assistance to subgrantees, workshops, events, support development of that 5-year action plan, training for employees of political subdivisions of Wisconsin, staffing capacity, consultation, contracted support to really effectuate those goals of the BEAD program, any asset mapping across the county and or region to kind of catalog broadband adoption, affordability, equity, access, deployment, conducting surveys of unserved, underserved, underrepresented communities, understanding those barriers to internet adoption. And then finally, costs associated with meeting the local coordination requirements, including capacity building at the local and regional levels. So those are some of the general categories, but I think it might be most useful to dive into some of the specific examples. So here are some examples that your entity, whether that be a county, a tribe, a redo, or a regional effort, you might think about considering using these funds on. So conducting outreach to improve and challenge the national broadband map. You might look to hire new staff or allocate existing staff time to broadband planning, including but not limited to embedding broadband into regional and economic plans and other community planning activities. You might allocate staff time to participate in technical assistance workshops or webinars. You might also convene industry stakeholders and identify strategies related to financing broadband or preparing for workforce. You might hire or allocate staff to refine or review permitting processes related to broadband deployment. You could also train staff, elected officials, local broadband champions to improve their knowledge of broadband internet adoption, or federal grant administration. Host and document events to discuss broadband and barriers to adoption. Purchase software license or data, whether that be mapping, speed testing, that sort of thing. You might conduct surveys or promote existing surveys to really kind of survey citizens and gather their needs and barriers. Again, you might allocate staff time or hire staff time to perform analysis of those survey results or other state, federal maps and data. You might send flyers advertising broadband listening sessions or digital equity events. You could host meetings with potential internet service providers in your area. Outreach materials translated into other languages. Hiring of translators and or interpreters or childcare support Wisconsinites' participation in these planning meetings. a little bit further, creating models for best practices of public-private partnerships for broadband deployment. So this is really a large list of options that you may use these funds on, but there are likely other opportunities or other things that we have not listed here, and we're fully aware of that. So kind of any other activities proposed by the applicant that are allowable by the funding and approved by the commission. So our office has a draft grant agreement available on our webpage. So once the application is submitted by May 1st, staff will follow up with a grant agreement to sign. In the meantime, you may wish to kind of review this draft grant agreement with your legal counsel, but it is ultimately required that each approved grant applicant enter into a grant agreement with the commission. So wrapping up here just a little bit, I spoke about a lot. In my mind, it kind of helps to break it down chunk by chunk and in a little bit of a timeline. So entities opted in. We're kind of past that phase. Past that phase. The allocation letter was sent out and the allocations were determined. Again, we're past that phase. Grant instructions were issued. They were issued today. So each entity will submit an application and a placeholder budget via the grant system. The commission will then approve those applications and grant agreements will be signed. We will have that list of initial deliverables due by June 19th of 2023 this summer. And then there, again, there's the understanding that the full performance period runs through May 1st, 2025. So continued planning activities throughout the performance period. Some resources here, pretty much everything, or almost, I should say everything that folks would need there or that was covered today is either listed on our BEAD Local Planning Grant Program webpage or our 5 BP 2023 IRF docket. And in many cases, it's listed in both spots. You may wish to subscribe to the docket. So you can, that third link is the opportunity to check out IRF, the homepage, and subscribe to that docket. And then the fourth link is that PSC grant system that we will need applicants to submit their grant application due by May 1st at 1:30 p.m. of this year. So that's a lot of talking from my part. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions. I'm happy to field those questions. So I would open it up. But yeah, thanks again for everyone for the opportunity. And I'll say WEDC and Extension are speaking next, but please engage with those folks for technical assistance needs as well. You know, we're kind of working on this all together, but if there are questions most appropriate directed to PSC, we'd be happy to answer those. But other questions related to technical assistance, that sort of thing, you know, WEDC and Extension might be resources that you might consider as well.
Thank you for that, Jaron. And are there 2 minutes ago, there were not any questions in the chat unless I've missed Kristen or Brandon. Are there questions in the chat that you, or Rory, if you have?
There are none for me.
I was just going to say Jaron knocked it out of the park, so I think we might be good.
So it would seem. So no questions, and please we would ask that you drop them in the chat. So next we will hear from Danny Jones from the WEDC, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, who will share some exciting news about the GEO Partners contract for speed testing. Danny is the Director of Rural Initiatives at WEDC. She has been with WEDC and its predecessor for over 10 years. And during this time, she has had the largest portfolio of industry sectors due to her ability to quickly evaluate industries and collaboratively identify solutions for them. Industries that had been in her portfolio are close to the hearts of rural communities, including telecommunications and forest products. Prior to working for the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and the Department of Commerce, she worked in account management and sales in the insurance industry and in technology-focused areas, including software tech and agricultural research and development. She is excited to bring the expertise and experience in industry analysis and solution development skill sets developed and honed across an over 30-year career to rural communities to assist them with issues dearest to their hearts. In her free time, she's an avid traveler. And Danny, looks like you're ready to go.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the introduction again. Can we go ahead and just move to the next 2 slides? Next one, please. Okay, so we'll just be really brief today and kind of give you guys a little bit of an update on the GeoPartner speed testing contract, the regional technical systems we're looking at, and the regional toolkits that we're looking at. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you remember, we had the GeoPartner's regional technical assistance contract. So that contract was executed very recently. There is a slight change to this. So originally we were discussing having that contract go to the end of this calendar year. So that would be December 31st, 2023. That has been adjusted, and now the contract extension is through to spring of 2024. The exact date of that we'll have to get to you, but it's going to be into the spring of 2024. Currently, the mapping is live. If you're interested in the license agreement for the data on the background, please reach out to North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. There is currently a holding page. There's the link through North Central Wisconsin RPC for the speed testing itself. There will be more details on what's going to happen with that after the 6th of April, so a little bit later this week. There are some decisions that the Region 9 broadband group has to decide on before we can tell you exactly where to go for the link to that testing. And then I'm going to show you just a real brief show on what the mapping looks like a little bit, courtesy of North Central Wisconsin RPC. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the speed test map. This is what it looks like when you first get on there. As you can see, there is a lot of information from the previous speed testing. So it'll tell you where there's no service, less than 25 down, etc. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see a county group data. That's basically the total speed test in an area. And if you click on those, it'll kind of give you a little more detail. Go ahead and hit the next slide, please. And that's the detail that you'll have on there. It's a little bit hard to see on the slide, so I apologize about that, but it'll kind of give you where in the county, who are the providers and what speeds that I believe it's an average that they're doing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, let me just go back to that. So we're very excited, and thank you to Dennis Lawrence and to Andy Faust for working with the WEDC's Officer of Prosperity on getting that contract signed. We will have more information, like I said, but we're just really excited that that contract has been executed, and we'll get more details for you going forward. As far as the toolkits are concerned, Division of Extension, we are meeting later this week to parse out everything that we're putting into these toolkits. As we've said before, there is some overlap in the toolkits that are pertinent to both regional groups and to the counties. So we're making sure that we're not duplicating work, that we're going to parse out the work and make sure that they get branded correctly and that they're going to meet the needs that everybody has here. The needs that we've heard are, you've desired some of the information that you were presented to today on how to meet grant deliverables, so and what those clear expectations are. There's been information that has been requested on process and a bit of background on what relates to broadband, information sheets such as funding is a good example, contact lists and so forth, and then some of the best practices that we've been encountering. So that's just a kind of a tip of the iceberg. We'll be pulling those together within the next few weeks for individuals, but we are going to definitely focus on things that will help get you ready for the June 19th, 2023 deadline. Next slide, please. On the regional technical assistance, so we have conducted a lot of the meetings. I think we have one more meeting that we have to do with our regional partners. And so what we've kind of looking at is kind of what the format on the technical assistance is going to be. So that's still to be determined. We're in conversations with both the Public Service Commission and with Division of Extension, because what we've heard is that there might be a bit of meeting overload. And so we want to be very cognizant of that. We also understand that there needs to be some clarity about the types of meetings, what's exactly going to be done in the meetings, especially since our 3 organizations are going to be hosting those meetings. And then we've also heard that our regional partners want to make sure that the partners are being included. So that would be our regional partners are making sure that they're included when counties are having meetings, and vice versa. Counties are aware when the regions have their meetings. We've also heard that broadband education is going to be a critical component for many of the REDs, kind of some of that historical information, as well as little bits and pieces that have come up in the conversations that people might not know about. We've heard about capacity constraints as well, and so any assistance that we can provide to help alleviate some of that capacity constraint. So we're hoping that that will be provided in the technical assistance. We are hearing as well that there are varying needs both with regions and within the counties in each region and the communities within those counties. So we're providing some information on the technical assistance that will help to alleviate some of that and probably get a lot of people up to the same level with each other. We're also hearing about leveraging subject matter expertise in a region. So we've heard a lot that some communities are really going gung-ho, they've got it. And how do we make sure that we can leverage that knowledge base that is currently in each region, as well as leveraging the knowledge that are coming from different regions outside. So we're making sure that that's getting pulled together in our technical assistance and in the toolkits. And then we're going to be leveraging economic development and planning initiatives. So examples are like workforce initiatives and tourism initiatives. Those are some of the things that we are hearing from some of the conversations that we're had. So we're making sure that those get incorporated into it as well. And then of course, the big one, there's the funding aspect too. There's a lot of funding that everybody has known has come down. There are still some pieces that are currently open and how maybe those can be leveraged. So again, this is just kind of a quick overview. We just want to let you know that we are working towards this. The format is still to be determined. We are debating whether we are going to try and do meetings in coordination with PSC and Division of Extension, or if we're going to maybe do more of a webinar format, or if we're going to do something where it's more of a static an element. So maybe something via the website or something along those lines. We're not quite sure yet. So stay tuned. We will have more information as those come out, but we're very cognizant of the timelines that everybody will be dealing with. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to leave you with this. So with the regional meetings that we've had, I've let everybody know that, we had these meetings, these were not really one and done. So if you have additional thoughts or concerns, please reach out. My contact information is in there directly. And then for those of you who have either broadband or non-broadband assistance, we do have a request for assistance form on WEDC's ruralwi.com website. So if you are a rural community and you have a need for technical assistance, please go to that link, fill it in. It's a very short request for assistance form, and we would be more than happy to get one of our team members to get in contact with you right away. And that is the end of my updates.
Thank you, Danny, for sharing about the speed testing resource. Again, we'll have time for questions at the end of our session. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat while they're fresh in your mind. Our next presenter will be Gail Hike from UW-Extension. Gail will highlight a BEAD and digital equity survey being conducted by Extension's Community Development Institute in cooperation with the PSC. Each county and tribe will be asked to complete the survey soon. Your input will help shape Wisconsin's BEAD and digital equity plans. Gail is a professor of practice with the University of Wisconsin Extension, where she serves as a broadband specialist. Gail has 39 years of experience in delivering community outreach programs in family and community economic development. She joined the Broadband Education Center in 2015, serving as a director for the Connected Aging Communities Initiative. That Connected Aging Communities program was a groundbreaking initiative that used a unique, high-tech, high-touch, holistic, hard to say that one, community development approach to enable aging residents to live independently at home. Gail's current broadband efforts center heavily on community planning for broadband access. She is a member of the National Digital Extension Education Team and has played a key role in the development of broadband community planning curriculum, training extension staff at a national level. Gail has developed training materials for the National 4-H Council's Tech Changemakers Digital Ambassador Program on digital inclusion. Over the last 3 years, Gail has served as a member of the Wisconsin Governor's Task Force on Broadband. Gail?
Thanks, Chris. And I want to be upfront. I may have to put my video so you can't see my screen because of my internet connection. So with that, we'll get started. I want to talk a little bit today about the county and tribal census that's coming up. Jessica, next slide, please. And you may have heard us talking about a countywide survey. And what we're really looking at is a census. We're in the process of gathering. What we want to do is gather statewide data that's going to aid in the development of Wisconsin's BEAD and digital equity plans. You heard Jaron talk a lot about the plans that we're in the process of writing, and the information we're gathering through this census is really going to help shape those plans. The Public Service Commission Wisconsin Broadband Office is sponsoring this activity. UW Extension is the one who's been working with the Public Service Commission Broadband Office to draft the survey. We're in the final stages of editing right now. And the University of Wisconsin River Falls is helping us put that in the Quiltrex survey format and will be helping us with dissemination and compiling the results. Next. So what's the census going to cover? What we really want to do is get a good feeling of what counties and tribes are doing right now as far as planning and deployment activities. We're going to be taking a look at your digital equity activities, taking a look at different activities that are taking place as far as digital learning, providing equipment, low cost opportunities for folks to be connected. We want to hear about the barriers that you're experiencing on the county and tribal level. And also take a look at some of the priorities that you may have. Priorities that center around broadband, but also around economic development, education, and government functions. So we're going to take a look at all those priorities as they relate to broadband and how we might incorporate those priorities into the state plan. And we're also going to be asking you, what resources do you need to help you get this work done so we can make sure we get everyone connected within the state of Wisconsin. Next slide, please. So the process for the census will be, the census is going to, there will be an email that'll go out to county executives, administrators, coordinators, and tribal presidents or chairpersons that will be going out asking them to participate in the census. The census will be conducted, like I said, through a Quiltrex survey tool. And it's anticipated that this survey census is going to take you several hours to complete. So what we're doing is we're going to provide you with a PDF file that'll allow you the opportunity to pull together the information you're going to need offline if you prefer. Recognizing it's going to take some time and some research and probably numerous phone calls to collect all the data. It may be necessary to contact, like I said, other departments within the county. I would anticipate you will probably need to contact someone in your planning department, GIS, maybe economic development, because we're asking counties to take a look at the entire county, not just the activities that you as a county government are doing, but all the things that are happening within the county boundaries. You may need to contact other municipalities to find out what they're doing in broadband if you don't already know. And I list agencies and organizations there. Often economic development may take a lead in broadband activities. So I would bet they would be one that you'll be working with, as well as probably your educational entities. When it comes to doing and answering questions about the digital equity, there you'll probably end up contacting a lot of folks that from private organizations, education, who are often the ones who are leading some of these activities with digital equity, teaching digital literacy classes. Okay, next slide. We recognize.
Yep, Tess Carr has her hand up. I don't know if you want to take a question now.
Sure, we can.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Tess.
Okay.
Excellent. I was just wondering, is this something that will be performed by the local economic development groups if we have opted to work with them on this grant?
I would say the initial correspondence will go to the county educator or the county, county executive administrator or coordinator. But as someone in economic development, I would encourage you to be in contact with that person at the county right away to tell them you know it's coming and that you really help them fill out that survey. It's going to be a team effort, and depending on your individual counties, those players will vary. But certainly, if you're working with that, please jump right in and work with them. Okay, I'm seeing lots of questions.
Gail, if I could jump in quick too, I think to follow up on what you're saying, the survey that Extension is working on is really going to be targeted for counties and tribes. So if you're a county that's in this local planning effort, you're working with a greater region, we're still interested in hearing what the county has to say about what's going on at the county level, because we want a really representative sample of what's going on in every county. So particular to the survey response, we don't want any of your redo partners filling out this survey on your behalf. You know, if you're, you know, kind of a broadband committee chair or a leader in broadband in your county, and you're speaking on behalf of the county, that's who should be filling out as kind of the primary person filling this survey out.
Right, thanks, Rory. Right, I was talking to our county economic development, so like Rory said, we're really concentrating on the county or the local tribe. We are expect to fill that out on the county level.
Gail, this is Chris. Yeah. Just a little bit of breakup coming from, so I will ask you to cut your video if you, and thanks.
There you go. All right, okay. Compensation, we know it's going to take you some time to pull this all together, and Public Service Commission will be looking at authorizing reimbursement up to $1,000 to counties and tribes to cover their time and expenses for completing the census. Now, note that it's going to go to the county or to the tribe because they're the ones who are going to be responsible for completing those local censuses. Upon completion of the census, the entities will receive directions on submitting your invoices. Next. Next slide, Jessica. Oops. The timeline, as we take a look at the timeline, you can see April 10th is our goal right now, that we will send out those emails inviting folks to participate. That's the week. Right now, we're doing some testing, having a few more eyes look at it before it goes out to counties. And so April 10th is our goal for that. Tribal contacts will be receiving that shortly after, targeting hopefully the week of April 17th. We want to make sure we're gearing the tribal surveys directly to your needs. And then May 15th will be the county census deadline, with May 26th being the deadline for tribal entities. Okay, next. Okay, Chris.
Indeed. Thank you, Gail, for sharing information on the BEAD and Digital Equity Survey. And we'll now open it up to questions. And I'm going to take questions until 12:57, right in there, and I'll cut that. So Brandon, if you have a question from the chat, please.
Yes, sorry about that. It looks like there was a question earlier on about Rory had answered a couple of them, but I'll just repeat them just in case, Rory, you want to add anything. So Jeff had asked, as a county applicant designee, do I fill out the applicant first and then look for a county resolution for approval after the PSC has approved the application?
Yeah, so I dropped a response in chat, but I think, you know, submitting the application is not binding. You know, what'll be binding is that contracted grant agreement, and we have a draft of that on our website. So I think you're going to want to look to your county board for some involvement. Once you get to that signing step on your grant agreement, that's when you start obligating your county to specific activities or specific rules and regulations. So, you know, we've got a draft on our website. If you want to get a head start, definitely start looking at that with your legal counsel, figuring out what kind of role your county board, county executive, you know, county leadership needs to have at the signing step. The submission is not binding.
And also, I know you responded, but just in case folks didn't see it in the chat, Barb had asked, what are the required reports beyond June 19th?
Yeah, for the local planning grant, kind of the required reports after June 19th is something we haven't come up with yet. I think at a high level, we're just going to be interested in kind of, and we'll provide plenty more guidance before anything's due, but just general updates on progress, what you've been up to, what activities you've done, any preliminary or interim findings, things like that. So, as long as you're doing the work, there's no reason why any sort of interim reporting would be onerous or difficult to prepare for. But we will follow up once we've got more firm deadlines for those.
Wonderful. Fred asks, and Danny did offer a little bit of input there, but Gail or Danny, if you could respond to this as well. Will broadband case studies be available in the toolkits, or where will they be available?
Right, I would say yes, we will both have examples of case studies, as well as the Public Service Commission does offer case studies. So they will be in all of our toolkits. We will be sharing those cross-referencing, as Danny alluded to. We'll be in conversation on a regular basis to see the best way to promote those, but you can look to our toolkits in all 3 locations.
Gail covered it, so.
Good. Sorry about that. Jean asks, will the time spent by the county employees completing this survey be a reimbursable expense through the BEAD local planning grant? Gail?
Yes, and I think Rory is probably best.
Maybe,
but yeah.
maybe I'll take this one. So, unfortunately, a little confusing the way it's implemented. There's kind of, we set aside $1,000 per survey response that we'll use to reimburse staff time or other costs that counties and tribes are incurring when they're filling out that survey. So, as part of filling out your survey, and we'll provide information when we send out the survey, when Extension sends out the survey, but record your staff time, record your efforts, and that will be reimbursed to the county. I think, Gene, particular to MadRep and kind of the local planning grant, I would say certainly helping counties fill out and prepare those survey responses is something we would consider an eligible expense under the BEAD local planning grant. So there's $1,000 particular to each county for their costs filling out the survey. And then separately, there's that local planning grant pot of money, both the $1,000 directly to the county, but also the larger pot of money for local planning. Those costs, that staff time, any other costs are certainly eligible for reimbursement.
Great.
Rory or Jerry, I can take the next one if you want to. Brandon, I figured I'd give you a little bit of a rest so we can trade off. From Barb at New North, can someone address who the Rory and Jerry, can someone address who the additional grants went to for the workforce planning and digital literacy and their role in this process?
Yeah, we have not announced those yet. The commission's going to meet in another open meeting, hopefully sometime very soon. It's not yet scheduled, but I would say keep your eyes peeled. We'll be sending out some press releases announcing it, once that decision is made by the commission. So nothing yet, but hopefully very soon.
Oh, okay. And then Jeff from Oneida County, is there a way to find out who the county executive administrators for Oneida County is? They will ask me to fill this out most likely with input from them as I need. I'm currently the executive director for Oneida County Economic Development Corporation, not a member of county government.
Yeah, I can take that one. Jeff, we can follow up offline, but the records that I've got is an individual named Lisa, Charbonneau. But I can follow up. I've got contact information for that individual. And the county board chair as well. So we can follow up. Thank you, though.
And Dave Carlson asked, will the surveys be sent to the designated county contact listed on the BEAD opt-in?
Right now, we are planning on sending those to the same folks who received the initial correspondence for the survey. So it will go to the county executive, the county administrator, the county coordinator, the tribal president or chairperson.
Okay, Gail,
Those
and then
also went to the county economic development people too. That's why.
Okay.
okay. And then Gail, what happens if, I'm reading Mark Liberda, what happens if the survey is filled out in a manner that you deem incomplete because the information simply isn't available or is unknown to us?
There's a lot of places on the survey, if you don't have information for a specific question, you are able to say not available, not applicable, you don't know, and that's okay. It just gives us an idea of where your county is in that status. We may also follow up with you. There's going to be numerous places on the survey that asks if you're willing to share. And if so, someone will contact you. If we find we might need a little more information, you might expect someone to follow up with you, but we do recognize that all of you are at a different place, not going to have information in all of these categories. So we're asking you to do the best you can. And we will appreciate the information you supply to us.
Thank you. And on the next one, Sue's question, if we could probably drop that in the chat, if I'm correct, Danny or somebody can, if we could drop that in the chat, it would be beneficial to all. And then, so I'll go on to Jessica's question from Door County. Have the PSC Digital Equity and Inclusion Planning Grant Awards been announced yet?
No, I think we said this before, but we're hoping to announce those in the next couple of weeks. I think once the commission is able to have an open meeting scheduled and discuss that, we'll put some press announcements out and let folks know about those awards.
Okay. Reading Todd's question, do I understand correctly that completion of the census survey is a mandatory condition of the BEAD grant funding?
No, it's not a mandatory function of the grant funding. They're two separate projects. We do hope every county will participate to the best of your ability. I think one of the important things with participating is it not only gives the state an idea of where you're at, so they can build that information into our state plans, but it can also serve as the basis for your local planning, which should help you in your local planning process. Those are the things you're going to be asking yourself on the local level. It'll let you know where you have holes in your planning and where you might need to concentrate. So they are two separate activities, and one isn't reliant on the other, but we highly encourage you to participate because I do think there will be benefit to you locally if you complete the census.
Thank you. I know I said I was going to cut it off at 12:57, but there's two questions now. The last two. Is there a single location that summarizes all the dates, times, and activities happening between PSC, UW, and WEDC?
That's a great question. I'm not sure there is one currently, but this is maybe a good time to pitch the Wisconsin Broadband Office's newsletter. There's been a lot of dates and times being thrown around, but I know that we make every effort to keep folks up to speed so they don't miss any dates. I would maybe, from a PSC perspective, pitch the PSC Wisconsin Broadband Office monthly newsletter.
And then the last question that we'll take here from Jean is, will participating redos get copies of the completed surveys from their participating counties?
I think it's absolutely our intent. I don't want to speak on behalf of Extension, but all the data we're collecting, we want to share back to everybody so that they can use it in planning. So, once counties are filling those out, we'll certainly, hopefully share as soon as we can the analysis, the results, any background or other information from those surveys.
Thank you, Roy. And before we sign off today, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Jessica Beckendorf, to explain Extension's next technical assistance offering. Jessica?
Yeah, we are on May 18th. Let me just pull up my information here. On May 18th, we are going to be holding a workshop called Community Organizing for Broadband Planning. It's all about being broadband ready, ensuring that you have a strong team, or with a strong local team. So you'll learn from Extension's community organizing efforts, and the interactive workshop will take you through tips, processes that you can employ in your local work, and some actionable steps that you can take with you to move your community's broadband efforts forward. So that's May 18th, 11 to 12:30. The details will be available soon on our website.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone who participated today in the third of our three-part series on broadband equity access and deployment, BEAD, if you will, planning for Wisconsin counties, tribes, and redos. As we noted earlier, a recording of this webinar will be posted on the Extension Community Economic Development website. As Jessica noted, our next session will be May 18th at 11 a.m. Watch for the registration announcement that will be coming out soon. Thank you to our presenters, and we hope to see you on May 18th, everybody. Thank you.